Lopsided relationships and fear mongering. You know, I see a lot of, I guess you would say, connection or crossover in many types of what I consider lopsided relationships and fear mongering. You know, when we came back from quarantine in 2020, there were some employers who were upset that workers had gotten unemployment benefits. And because of those unemployment benefits, some of those workers didn't want to come back to work because they were actually getting more benefit being out of work than they would have if they went to work. If they went to work, they would have to pay gas, childcare. They would have to sit in, long commutes. They would have to do all of these things, but sitting at home, they were getting these unemployment benefits, and it was actually more cost effective for them to be at home than to return to work. That's a signal that there's something wrong in the system. It's not a signal that the people are wrong. They are making the best decision for them. They are making the decision in their best interest. And sometimes you would see the same kind of thing play out when an employee would want to go into a manager's office or a boss's office and say, hey, I'd like a raise. I've been doing this. I've got these great performance reviews and so on and so forth. And the manager would counter with, well, we can give you a new title, and that title comes with more responsibilities and often more hours, but we're not going to give you a raise. And so the employee is saying, wait a minute, you want to give me a higher title that's going to cause me more work, and you want me to get the same pay, and this is your counter to me wanting more pay? And then they're surprised that that employee goes out and looks for another job and sometimes ends up being able to stair step their way to much higher paying jobs in a very short amount of time. But they tried to come to you first. They wanted to work with the employer that they were with first. But because there was a lopsided relationship, because there was a lack of respect and a lack of value of that employee, the employer didn't want to listen to anything they had to say. Sometimes you see the same thing in romantic relationships. You see people who they look at their grandparents and their parents and they say, my mother went to work and she came home and she cooked and she cleaned and she did all the childcare and she never complained. So my woman, I don't want to make things any easier for her. I don't want to pamper her in any way that my mother didn't get pampered. I want her to go to work and I want her to come home and I want her to take on all those domestic duties on her own. And women are saying, why would I do that? If you had a roommate, that roommate would have 50% of the bills, but you guys would split whatever domestic duties there were. You would each clean up after yourself. You would cook for yourself or take turns cooking. You wouldn't expect them to take on the lion's share of anything. So why would I get a worse deal than a roommate? Why would I be treated worse and have more work and have less help than a roommate? Because I'm a woman? Because this is supposed to be my pleasure to do this? Well, who told you that? So it's, again, this idea that these lopsided relationships have been normalized. And recently there's been a lot of talk about the declining birth rate. And that's another sign of a lopsided relationship, because the majority of the time, the people who are bringing up this declining birth rate are CEOs, billionaires, millionaires, multimillionaires, and they're concerned that they're not going to have workers and consumers in the future. That's really all they're concerned about, because we really could run this planet with many fewer people. I mean, it's been done before. When I was growing up, we didn't have 8 billion people and the world was running just fine, you know? So when my parents were growing up, my grandparents, again, we know that the world can exist and jobs can get done with fewer people. So the crisis, and I put that in kind of air quotes, the crisis is that some of these billionaires think that their profit margin is going to decrease if they have fewer consumers, that they might have to pay the people that are working for them more because there might be, and I'm saying might in a big capital letter, there might be more of a workload on certain workers. And so those workers might be more in demand. So they might be able to, dictate higher prices, negotiate higher salaries because they're more in demand. But why is that a problem? And why do people not want to have kids? Well, a lot of people don't want to have kids because there's no universal health care in America. And having kids is extremely expensive when you talk about medical bills. There's very little help with daycare. And daycare in some places can be almost as expensive as college tuition. There's no maternity leave that's kind of universal or paternity leave that's universal. It's very individualized to different companies, different industries. So when you have all these barriers, there are many reasons why people don't want to have kids. So you're not talking about removing these barriers. You're not talking about, I am so concerned about the birth rate that I am going to invest in this, that, and the other. I am going to put grants out there. I am going to put, bills on the table where this would be an incentive to having kids. I'm going to push for, to get rid of some of the negativity we have around motherhood, because we say out of one side of our mouth that we value mothers, but on the other side of our mouth, we don't have any, programs that show that we value mothers nationwide, so there are things that people could do to put some money where their mouth is, but it's a lopsided relationship because of the fact that women have been having babies, even with all of these obstacles, for years. They're thinking that shaming us, or as I started off saying, fear mongering, is going to be the thing that's going to get us to where we need to be. They're going to make us afraid of somehow some kind of population decline is going to hurt our daily lives. They're going to make us afraid of wanting to get a better job or joining a union. They're going to make us afraid of all these different things. But the fear mongering is not working as well as they want it to. And that's why we have so many people pushing for Project 2025, because Project 2025 is pushing for some of these freedoms that we have, the education programs that we have, the DEI programs that we have that do help women, that do help minorities, that do help workers, the trade unions and things that we have. It's pushing to take all that stuff away so that the lopsided relationships can become more lopsided and people will have even fewer rights, even fewer helps for the common man and more helps for the billionaires. Just some food for thought. May you walk in Zennurgy.